Howdy, y'all. It's Curious Raven on this creepy pasta Saturday. How are y'all today? I hope great. We are going to read one story. It is called A Man Came at Closing Time, and it is by SatterDead. Not too long ago, I saw a viral video compilation of thieves in low-income areas. People filling up baskets with items and walking out the door, breaking windows, threatening cashiers, that kind of stuff. But one of the 3-second clips in the compilation was something different. In the clip, we can see a group of people walking over a broken glass door, slowly marching. It looks like a riot, but there's more to it. I was there, and I want to tell the whole story. This happened a few years ago, before heading off to college. I wanted to save up some extra money. I used to live in a pretty shitty neighborhood, and there were only 2 options for a side gig. One was a local bar, and the other was at a convenience store. I applied at the convenience store, had a quick interview with the manager, and started the following Monday. Now, I gotta stress just how run down this place was. This was the kind of place where the same homeless man sits outside every day, all day, where there were no baskets to carry stuff in. They'd been stolen too many times. There were a dozen signs taped to the door with a dozen little rules, all to prevent the various gifts and thefts that had been attempted over the years. No bags, no backpacks, no plastic bags, no canvas bags, no carts, and of course, no weapons. Still, despite its faults, it was the only place local folks could afford to shop at, and while there were some people who took advantage of it, a vast majority loved the place, right down to the homeless guy chilling by the door. I was planning to be there for the summer. We had a morning and evening shift, and we changed who did what every 2 weeks. The video clip in question took place during my 4th week, my 2nd week at the evening shift. It was a Saturday evening. Benny, the homeless guy, was off to recycle some cans. The AC was acting up, leaving a thin layer of humidity on everything in the store, including me. I was working at the counter. It was almost closing time, but I wasn't working alone. There was also Lainey, a mother of 3 who wanted to get some extra money on the side, while her husband was posted overseas, a woman in her mid-40s, with the long black hair that could almost reach her knees. Every time I think of her, I'm reminded of oatmeal cookies. We were ready to close when a customer walked in. I was expecting Benny, so when I turned to see a complete stranger, I was a bit surprised. Now, we get new people all the time, but this one was unusual for a number of reasons. One, he was clearly not local. The guy was wearing a brand name blazer and custom tailored pants. 2, he was in a hurry. He was clutching his brown canvas bag, panting like a tired dog. I didn't get the time to ask him to hand it over, as per sign. You got salt?" he asked. "Mineral salt." "Yeah, go check." He was sprinting down the aisle before I had a chance to finish my sentence. Lainey peeked out from the dairy aisle with a raised eyebrow. I shrugged. Moments later, there was some commotion. I went to check on the guy and saw that he had pulled down 6 cans of salt onto the floor, opened them, and drowned his bag in it. He was whining and pleading, repeating, "Come on, come on, come on," over and over. He was in distress, like his life depended on it. I didn't know what to do. I was going to call the police, but wanted to de-escalate first. Still, I didn't want to talk to him. There was no telling what a guy in this state of mind might do. Instead, I stepped back, got my phone out, and talked to him as calmly as possible. "Sir, you can't do that in here," I said. "You need to pay and take this outside." There's no time," he said. I can't, I'm sorry." What happened next came out of nowhere. One moment I was looking at this crazy guy covering the ground in salt. Next moment, pandemonium. Lainey screamed at me from the front counter. The lights began to flicker, then die, leaving the store in sudden darkness. Running up to the front counter, my jaw dropped. Lainey had barely managed to close and lock the front door. There were at least 24 people outside, none of whom I recognized. These people were something else entirely. At first glance, there was nothing strange about them, but looking a little closer, you could see a few things were off. Example, there was a woman in a nightgown. She didn't have shoes on. A little further back, there was a guy who looked like a political campaigner for a candidate I'd never heard of. And to the side was this really tall man who looked like a fancy sommelier, except the front of his shirt had been cut to shreds, like he'd been run over by a lawnmower. These people were gathering around the storefront, poking and prodding for a way in. One of them smacked their hand flat on the glass. Lainey already was calling the police. The store had security cameras once, but had long since been wrecked. We just had these camera-looking things that were basically just a red light. It was mostly to deterrent rather than something functional. So there was no way for me to check how many people were really out there. Still, there were more than a few. I didn't even know that one of the front cameras actually worked, providing the clip in question later on. The strange man with the canvas bag was on his knees crying, full on wailing like a scared kid. It was eerie to see someone just break down like that. It's at that point you start to realize how serious something really is. We had managed to lock ourselves in. Lainey was on the phone trying to get the police to hurry. It wasn't easy to get them to come by this neighborhood. Apparently, it was viewed as a bit of a lost cause. They advised her to get out of there and let our insurance company deal with it. The fact that these people showed up out of nowhere didn't seem to bother them, and the fact that our lives were in danger was described as exaggerating. I'll have this one vivid memory of the beginning of that night. There was this neon sign for a bar across the road, and that was the only light that came through. All these strange people backlit by this eerie red and blue. It was eerie. There was no way to tell what was going to happen next. Were they there for us? For the store? For the strange man? While Lainey kept calling for help, I turned my attention to the stranger. He slumped down against one of the shelves and gone catatonic. He just sat there, staring at the bag. I pushed against his shoulder a bit, and he didn't seem to notice. I decided to check the bag. This too garnered no response. The bag contained a sort of metal thermos, a silvery gray container that had burst open. There was a navy blue liquid covering the inside of the bag, now drenched in salt. It had this faint smell of ammonia and had begun to harden into a gel. I did my best not to touch it. "It's too late," the man whispered. "It's too late. It doesn't matter anymore." "What?" I yelled. "What doesn't matter? Who are you?" He waved his head back and forth, as if bobbing for an answer, but no words came to mind. He shook his head and sunk his face back into his hands. I tried to push him to answer, but he was just broken. There was no point in talking to him, and judging by the sounds coming from our storage, I didn't have time to stand around. I could hear Lainey yelling at the emergency responder. I could hear a repeated metal clanking out back, like someone was beating the back of the door with a steel pipe. And then a grinding metal noise. It took me a moment to realize that they were moving the trash container out back. probably to get up on the roof. I rushed back to Lainey, who was hanging up phone and trying again, desperate to get someone on the line who was ready to actually listen. "You think they're on the roof?" I stuttered. "I think they're climbing." Shit. She took me by the arm and led me to the back storage. There, she pointed to the frail metal ladder leading to a yellow hatch in the ceiling about 12 feet up. "Make sure it's locked. Block it with something." "With what?" "I don't know." She stormed back out a second later. I grabbed a metal pipe from a vacuum cleaner and painstakingly made my way up the ladder. I managed to lock the hatch and jam the pipe between two handles. It wasn't very stable, but it would hold for a bit. It was probably some kind of rooftop maintenance hatch, but likely for ventilation purposes. The thing hadn't been opened in years. The rust on the metal hinges testified to that. As I was about to climb back down, I stopped, looked back up. While the hatch was shut, I could tell there was something up there. There was this low huffing noise coming from it. Someone was pressing their face against the other side of the hatch, breathing against it. Out of some morbid curiosity, I crept a little closer. "What do you want?" I spat. "What the hell do you want?" "Home," something mumbled. "Go home." It was such an eerie noise, like someone belching the words rather than speaking them, like an involuntarily painful reaction. More seizure than speech. Home, go home. Then a crash. I hurried down the ladder and rushed towards the front door. This was a scene shown in the clip, a few seconds that we got from the only security camera that intermittently worked. They had broken through the door and were slowly stepping inside. They didn't seem to be in a hurry. If anything, they seemed exhausted. For a second, Lainey and I just held our breath. There was no way to tell what was going to happen. Finally, a man with a crowbar stepped forward. He looked at us and belched up something dark that covered his chest. Then, as if nothing happened, he walked right past us. The others followed. They were heading to the aisle with the strange man and canvas bag. Lainey had given up on calling for help and had resorted to filming instead. It was helpless. The only thing we could do. We couldn't fight these people. We were outnumbered 10 to 1. I considered pushing past them and just running into the night, but I didn't want to go near them. There was no telling what happened if you provoked them. These weren't ordinary people. I can't tell you what was wrong, but I can tell you something was. What happened next, you can't see in the clip. 24 people descended on that aisle, picking up the canvas bag and tearing it apart. They were rubbing the contents of the broken thermos thing over themselves, climbing over one another to get every little drop of it. It looked like a snake pit of arms, heads, and legs. People just devolving into careless meat, completely devoid of conscious thoughts. Animals. Meanwhile, the strange man was just sitting there, catatonic, as a bag was torn to pieces. A handful of the intruders sort of flopped over. They lay flat on their backs, letting their legs and feet curl into something resembling dead branches. Others were making these excruciating, hungry, whining noises, desperately weeping at the empty bag. Then they turned their attention to the stranger. One of them clawed at his leg. He shook them off. The other did the same. "No," he said. "No, no." It was this weak little grunt, like the man was fighting himself to realize what was about to happen. Lainey and I shared a terrified look. "The fire extinguisher," Lainey whispered. "Get the fire extinguisher." It was across the store. As soon as I turned my back on them, I heard the strange man groaning, "No!" grow more desperate. I went from a mumble to an angry yell to a desperate plea. Then it was just screaming, blood-curdling scream. I got the fire extinguisher and ran back to the aisle, meeting Lainey halfway. She had this haunted look on her face and shook her head. She couldn't close her mouth, like her face was stuck in a panicked, silent scream. She covered her mouth with her hands, shaking like dry leaves. "Oh my God," she huffed. "Oh my fucking God." I didn't see much. There was blood, but like thick blood, chunks of it, tufts of hair, pieces of a torn shirt, bone. Couple intruders were rolling around the bloodied floor like it was catnip. Others were slowly getting up, disillusioned and desperate. One older man covered mouth to toe in dripping blood, pointed a shaking finger at me and Lainey. "Them," he coughed. Maybe them." Then they came for us. I didn't realize that was about to happen until they smiled. They clung to this primal hope that we somehow had something they needed. Lainey snapped me out of it, dragging me to the back storage. She fumbled the keys and locked the double doors, while I used a broom handle to bar them. There were still banging metal noises coming from both the ceiling hatch and the back door. Then a voice. "Them," it wheezed. "Them, them, them." And from the back door, another voice parroted it like a rising storm. The word swept over the invaders until we heard it everywhere. "Them, them, them." We made our way to the lunchroom, for I heard the broom handle crack. They were through the storage doors. Lainey was desperately dialing her phone when I locked us in the lunchroom. A tiny room with a shared bathroom, a window, and a couple of lockers. I could hear her wet skin slap against the window, but I couldn't see what it was. I could hear wet skin slap against the window, but I couldn't see what it was. The curtains were drawn. "Fucking yes," Lainey cried into her phone. Yes, it's me again. They're getting in. The window broke before I even saw someone. I pulled the safety pin from the fire extinguisher and blasted whatever was trying to get in. Lainey fled into the bathroom, locking it behind her. The next few seconds felt like eternity. Someone was crawling through the broken glass of the window. I could see the rough stains of blood against the powdered white. The lunchroom door buckled. I could hear flesh hit the concrete, and the hatch in the storage broke outside. Someone fell through. It sounded like a hard boot coming down on a wet cabbage. They were breaking through, slowly but surely, all to the sound of rhythmic them, them, them. I swung a locker open, but realized there was no way I could hide in there. I could go for the window. I couldn't push past the door. This was it. It was it. To this day, I lay awake thinking about what I felt in that moment. That ice-cold primal panic, forgetting to breathe, feeling your tongue drying up as your airways open up, preparing for a death scream. Then Lainey pulled me into the bathroom. It was tiny. It was meant for, at best, one average-sized person. I fell backwards, landing my back against the toilet. Lainey climbed over me to lock the door just as someone reached the handle. The door opened inwards, so I put my leg and locked my knees. Lainey fumbled around the sink where she had put her phone. Someone was still on the line, but I suspect all they could hear was our desperate screams and that ever-present mantra, them, them, them. The hinges were shaking. The metal handle rattled. I could count every nail on the floor and see the minuscule movements as they slowly rolled out. In that moment, all I could hear was my own heartbeat and how it slowly synced up to the monotonous chant of them, them, them. Looking back at it, my mind is just black. There's nothing there. It's trying to remember a vague nightmare, something that happened to an unreal version of yourself. And in those moments when you realized that you were there, the real you, then it spirals. And for a couple of skipped heartbeats, I'm back there fighting for my life. I'm back with that chant, that banging on the door. A little longer. It was still dark. But with every push against the door, with every inch the door gave, a little glimpse of moonlight came through, like a sickening strobe light. But a little longer was all we needed. The final thing I heard them say was, "No, home, please, home." And this combination of home, them, please, no. The banging slowly stopped. My hearing went from the awful mantra to my own heartbeat. And then nothing. A little breeze, perhaps. "Excuse me? Y'all doing all right in there?" Benny, the homeless guy. The coast was clear. Stepping out, there was no one but Benny left. The ground was covered in black ash sinking of ammonia and sulfur, but the tackards were gone. The place was a complete mess. Every window and door broken. You'd see the traces, the ash where people had dragged their feet before they seemingly disappeared. Going back out into the store, there was no sign of the strange man. There was still blood splatter covered the side of the aisle, but now the ground was covered in the awful black ash. I stepped over the broken front door and past the trampled flowers and broken glass. I have this vivid memory of blue petals from a sunflower getting stuck to the side of my black work shoe as I went out into the night. Minutes later, the police stepped over the broken front door as I went out into the night. Minutes the police showed up, and the rest is history. The whole event was categorized as a sort of riot. No suspect was arrested. The strange man was never identified. From what I've heard, they never investigated anything or assault for all of those intent and purposes. That night was strange. Was a strange break-in. So yeah, somehow that clip made me think way into a random compilation videos online. I'm not sure how. Lainey sent me the link. It's been a few years, but we still keep in touch. Not a lot though. Something on another kind of, seeing one kind of reminds me of this night and think of us just wanting to forget. I guess what I want to say is that some things are different from what they seem. So think twice before you share something. Take a step back, think, and really, really look. Alright, that's the end of this story, y'all. I hope y'all enjoyed this story. I did. Thank you so much. I love y'all so much. I will see y'all next week. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy, y'all. It's Curious Raven. Here with you with some haunted house stories today. I hope everyone has been doing good. I've been struggling a little bit. That's why I haven't really been on a schedule with my videos, trying to find a good routine again. But let's get into the stories. Number 1. For some backstory on my house, the previous tenant lived here all his life with his mother. The guy lived here about 50 years. To my knowledge, his mother was very ill and sadly passed away due to an illness. I moved into this house at the beginning of October of 2023, and everything was fine at first. It's larger than my old home, which gives a lot more space for the dog. She's a big Old English bulldog, so the space was definitely appreciated. And also a lot more storage space. I'm not a medium, but I'm definitely tapped into my senses, and ever since I moved in this house, I have pictured an at-home hospital bed, all the wires, machines, and stuff attached to an older woman, probably around her early 70s, in what is currently my dining room. This woman has short, gray curly hair, wrinkles, glasses, a purple shirt, blue eyes, and a pale complexion. Around late November was when things started happening. Most incidents stemming from the dining room. They say that dogs can see what we can't, and I truly believe that. In the first incident, my dog walked into the living room and into the dining room, looking up as if she were following someone, and then sat wagging her tail as if there was someone in front of her. The second incident came around early January, when she was staring into the dining room, wagging her tail as if someone was in there. This has happened at least 5 times. She has also been sat at a chair in a dining room and gave call to the air. Around 2 weeks ago, things moved away from just the dog. All the TVs in the house will randomly turn on in the middle of the night if nobody is near a remote. Last night, I went to use the restroom and didn't lock the door because I saw no point. I was on my phone when I heard a click, so I looked up and the door was now locked. Just now, I was laid in bed drifting off to sleep, but I was disturbed by 4 knocks on my ceiling. Not sure if I'm going insane or what, but I definitely feel as if there is something happening here. Number 2. Please, I cannot sleep. I'm hearing noises, constantly knocking, banging. My door's knocking. Yesterday I was sleeping and then suddenly my door was banging, kind of like the police were there. So I got up in a panic, went to my door, and no one was there. And no one could have been pranking me because it was happening till I stepped close to the door. And there's no way someone could have ran that fast, since my apartment is in the middle of the hallway, and no one can run that fast to the end of the hallway. I can't sleep. I've slept about 12 hours last week. Every time I sleep, I hear walking, knocking, walking. I'm so paranoid. Can anyone help? Number 3. When we bought the townhouse 9 years ago, we called it Lucky Number 13 in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It was a bargain. We found a beautiful black cat around the neighborhood and called her Mama Cat. One day, my mom was talking to one of my neighbors who shared a bit of history about the place. The first owner was a woman named Grace Stinson, who was savagely murdered in this townhouse. The realtor didn't disclose this information to us. Her murder is unresolved. I believe her story was aired on Unsolved Mysteries. I also found out that other people who leased or owned the property had problems. I'm not sure if they were paranormal, but they were all subjected to unfortunate events. I'm not sensitive to spirits, but my sister is. She felt Grace's presence, but also something menacing. We had the home blessed and cleansed it often. My relationship with my sister deteriorated while we both lived here. We both had mental health issues and substance abuse issues. I'm not sure if this home had anything to do with those problems. We are very opposite in our personalities. Is there anything else you can recommend for me to do to help this townhouse find peace? My sister just moved out, and now it's my turn to try to find some of happiness there. I don't have the financial support my sister does. I'm disabled and live on $1,000 a month income. I'm going to have it appraised when I get there. I feel like I should tell the realtor about the murder. Another problem is that my sister has caused a lot of damage to her 3rd floor, which was all hers. It needs to be completely redone. So, this will also lower the value. I can go into many details, but I'm hoping to find a way to stay there. I still love it a lot. Thank you for reading this. I know it was a long post. Yes, I still get mail for Grace. Update. I didn't include this in my post because the picture was lost years ago on my sister's old computer. I tried to get her to ask a friend who bought her computer to get the picture off the computer's hard drive. I think that's where it was. Her friend had bought the computer for her, but then suddenly died. Anyhow, I wish I had it. I wouldn't have believed it myself of not looking at it when I first moved in. My sister took pictures of new curtains for the 3rd floor windows. In that picture, a translucent woman was standing in front of her curtains looking out the window. We only see the back of her. My sister was sensitive to spirits, and she most likely occupied the 3rd floor. Her bathroom was where Grace in the picture, a translucent woman, was standing in front of her curtains looking out the window. Her bathroom was where Grace Stinson was found. In the shower stall, plastic bag on her head and stabbed viciously. The picture thing sounds like rubbish, but it amazed me. I wish I still had that picture. 'Cause Number 4. None of these stories come from me, but my other family. I'm going to start off with my dad's. There isn't much to this story, but when he lived at my grandma's house for a little bit, he claimed to hear footsteps upstairs sometimes. Same with my mom when she stayed there before. The next story comes from my grandpa. He told me about 11 years ago when he went up to bed before my grandma, he lay down on the bed and after a few minutes he felt someone get in bed with him. He said to my grandma, "You finally came up?" But no response. He said he was too scared to turn around. He claimed he also heard no breathing and felt nothing after. About 5 months ago, I was screwing around with the ghost app, some responses, and I left. My grandpa went to bed and the same thing happened to him. He thinks I awakened the spirit because keep in mind, last time that happened was 11 years ago. What do you guys think about this? It still feels uneasy in the house sometimes. That could just be me though. Number 5. I lived in the Midwest, North Dakota to be specific. My family lived on a farm, and the house had been moved there. I don't know how that worked back then. It makes some sense now because there was a door at the front of the house that would just drop off and had no stairs to it. Anyway, I have an older sister and a younger sister. They shared a bedroom, and it faced our garage, which was the one light at night. Mine was across the hall, but the doors always open so you could see just about anything going on. One night, it was so long ago I can't recall if I woke up or was just awake, but I seen the shadow of a young female on the wall of the hallway. I called both my sisters' names. I seen the shadow's head turn and it moved and then disappeared. I went into my sister's room and called her names again softly. Nobody moved, so I just went back to mine. I can't recall anything after that. It was the mid-80s. I was a kid, but I can still recall that shadow. Number 6. Before I start, I'd like to note that there has been some too few occurrences before in the past with something going on. I'm not sure what. So I had to give my cat Maggie up for adoption to get another pet, one that I could keep in my room because my stepfather was getting sick, and she would leave paw prints after she used her litter box on our table and counters, and it would happen often. After training her for about 3 years now, nothing worked. Toys, treats, and even water, sprays, but nothing. Anyways, when I had her, she would stare at random places for a little while and her ears would go back. I remember that sometimes. Her eyes would grow large as well. I was home alone this one day and my mom had gone out, but my stepdad was in the hospital. I had to give my cat a bath because she was covered in fleas. We had tried everything to get rid of them. Flea combs, flea medicine, flea protectant collars. Fleas had infested the majority of our house, especially my bedroom. That's when we had all three, me, my stepdad, and my mom decided to give her up for adoption and into a place where she could be treated because we couldn't afford it at the time. We had tried what I had previously mentioned, and it costed us a lot. Therefore, we couldn't afford another possible failing treatment. Sometimes at night, even today, I still hear noises and it sounds like thuds, bangs, and very rarely I'll hear someone call my name. The calling my name part is definitely not my favorite. I'm not encouraging the behavior I'm saying to this, but I'm a teenager and, as some of us, I let someone in my house. Me and him were making out, and we heard what sounded like a scratch on my wall or something being moved. We both looked at each other and laughed. Unfortunately, we aren't together anymore though. But back in about September, October of 2023, I was downstairs and I was sitting on the couch. At the time, my stepdad had a functioning electric wheelchair. He definitely thought he was big and strong, and he sure was. Anyways, he was in the hospital and his electric wheelchair was in the garage and the lights were off outside. The outside lights the garage lights, and even the wheelchair lights. I'm not sure if all electric wheelchairs have lights on them, but they're definitely so fun to ride. My stepdad would let me on it sometimes. I heard a thud in the kitchen. It literally sounded like something banged or a loud ass noise. I'm watching TV and I looked to my right and saw absolutely nothing at all. The lights over the entertainment center and my stepdad's bedroom light were the only lights on in the inside of my house. So that's how I saw into the kitchen, with just a little brightness shining, making the lighting very dim in the kitchen. I looked to my right and swear to you, bro, on my fucking word, I saw the tallest thing ever, as tall as my glass screen door almost. I jumped. I didn't know who or what it was, so I went and got my mom, because at the time we didn't have cameras outside to see who or what it was. And guess what? The fucking lights were on the electric wheelchair. Just the backlights, which takes 2 hits to the button. And like I said earlier, no lights were on outside. I remember my heart stopped and the color from my face drained and my heart started racing. What do we do now? Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven. I hope y'all have had a good weekend. Today we have some haunted house stories for you. Number 1. I live with 24 people in a co-op house. Our house is a historic mansion built in 1854. We have an expansion unfurnished basement. In one corner of the room, it is used as a maintenance room. It is the most darkest room in our house. I hang out down there a lot, 99% of the time alone. I do work in restorative glazing, where I repair and restore windows of historic value. The oldest ones I have done are 180 years old. I'm in the middle of giving the room a huge makeover. I am reorganizing, purging a bunch of things, and have moved out 2 huge metal cabinets, a 4-tier wall shelf, as well as I have moved those 2 tables. This is important later. I have recognized down there the presence of spirits, but I've never felt it so intensely, like that I have felt actually disturbed. It's more like something in the background, and I'm conscious of it, but I just shrug. It's like I just coexist with the energies. I always work down there alone and have never felt afraid of anything. The work I do is out of love for keeping the windows crafted by the carpenters of their time alive. And I think that's why, despite how much I am disturbing their environment, I'm alright in their book. Parenthetically, I did rent a place once where I lived with spirits, and the energy was very intense, which is a different story entirely. But on my move-out date, I asked the homeowner about it, and he confirmed with me 2 specific ghosts that lived there with many stories. It was the first time I felt the presence of spirits. With the mansion, I do not feel the presence of anything of the other world, anywhere else but a suite on the 3rd floor, which I had actually been intent on believing is cursed. Come to find out, I learned that there had been multiple suicides in the suite that were spaced 30 years apart. This is just my experience in recognizing the presence of spirits. In the few times I have felt them, I have not been wrong. Many other people are on this sub I see have that too. Like, I realize this basement room is really creepy in the traditional sense, and I don't want this to come off as I only think it's inhabited by spirits, because it is just creepy in the traditional sense. I sincerely feel them there, but I've never been actually creeped out by anything. That was until tonight. So 2 things. As I mentioned, I moved a lot of stuff around. I made a lot of noise, a lot of banging, a ton of ruckus, giving this room makeover 2 straight days, and I'm not even done. I was in the middle of taking a break from heaving and throwing shit around, sitting down and writing a draft for the workshop I teach, when all of a sudden I felt this feeling of absolute dread, like so intense, like I was being watched by somebody I'd really pissed off, and they were standing right behind me. It really shook me so badly I panicked, grabbed my things, and bolted all the way out the basement. See that little door there that is opened? Before now, it was obstructed by a shelving unit, so it stayed shut. It gets hot as hell in the basement because the boiler is right there. And that small door opens up to a drafty crawl space that lets in a little bit of air. So I've been keeping the door open. Before now, it's always stayed shut. So it is possible I pissed off one of the basement spirits by being so loud, or maybe as a new, more bitter spirit has wandered in through the space I opened. I didn't know the latter was possible until I was doing some research earlier. How can I calm them down there? I need to work down there, but I am so shaken right now to go down there. But I need to get some work done. I seriously have never felt this way when I've been down there, and I spend a lot of time in that room. It's really, really inconvenient. How do I fix this? Number 2. 3 years ago, I was alone at home. My parents were out shopping, and I was watching videos on YouTube. That day, around 11 a.m., I heard something fall in the hallway. I look and notice that it's medicine. My parents arrive and I ask them where the medicine was. They tell me it was in the medicine cupboard, which was half open, that it was in the back of one of the floors behind some medicines. It was summer, there was no wind, and even fewer windows open. A week later, alone again for same reason watching YouTube, I hear a door slam on the floor above. Because yes, I was on the ground floor. My dog who was with me ran into my room, maybe out of fear, which he never does. Then I hear a switch go wrong, and then another door, and another, and it wouldn't stop. About 15 minutes later, things calm down. My dog sticks his head out of the room, looks left, right, and then goes back into the bedroom. Weird. And it starts again. The doors and the switches, the intense stress of my dog and me. And after a few minutes, which seemed like an eternity, nothing. I call my father petrified, who tells me to go upstairs and see if a window is open. My dog sticks his head out, looks around, then leaves. I go out too. I go upstairs. No windows open and no lights on. The doors, for their part, were haphazard, even though they were all closed at the base. On the day of this event, I was 11 years old, and if you have any rational explanations, I'm all ears. Number 3. So me and my family, my mom, stepfather, and sister, live in a new build, meaning we are first owners and been living here for some while. Even though there have been times where I felt watched or a presence somehow, when I was home alone, I shrugged it off as normal. But whenever I'm chilling in our living room and home alone, I suddenly hear a sort of thud from the other side of the house from an unused room where my nephew sleeps when they come over. Nothing too serious. I thought until recently when I was eating in the dinner room and my stepfather was on the couch in the living room and my mother in the kitchen finishing food. I forgot to mention, there was half of a watermelon on our counter with a knife in it. Suddenly, I just see a hole, and the knife from the watermelon literally is thrown into the middle of the kitchen at least 2 meters away. Nobody even touched the watermelon, and the knife was stabbed into it. So I don't think the wind could have thrown a knife out of a watermelon, especially due to the weight of the knife, and that was pretty unexplainable for me. Since that event, whenever I go past a certain point in our hallway, I feel uncomfortable and watched. Can someone explain what could have caused the knife to fly out like that? Number 4. When we bought the townhouse 9 years ago, we called it Lucky Number 13 in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It was a bargain. We found a beautiful black cat around the neighborhood and called her Mama Cat. One day my mom was talking to one of the neighbors who shared a bit of history about the place. The first owner was a woman named Grace, who was savagely murdered in this townhouse. The realtor didn't disclose the information to us. Her murder is unresolved. I believe her story was aired on Unsolved Mysteries of Grace Stinson. I also found out that the other people who leased or owned the property have problems. I'm not sure if they were paranormal, but they were all subjected to unfortunate events. I am not sensitive to spirits, but my sister is. She felt Grace's presence, but also something menacing. We had the home blessed and cleansed it often. Our relationship with my sister deteriorated while we both lived there. We both had mental health issues and substance abuse issues. I'm not sure if this home had anything to do with these problems. We were very opposite in our personalities. Is there anything else you can recommend me to do to help this townhouse find peace? My sister just moved out, and now it's my turn to try to find some happiness there. I don't have the financial support my sister does. I'm disabled and live on $1,050 a month. I'm going to have it appraised when I get there. I feel like I should tell the realtor about the murder. Another problem is that my sister has caused a lot of damage to the third floor, which was all hers. It needs to be completely redone, so that will also lower the value. I can go into many details, but I'm hoping to find a way to stay there. I still love it a lot. Thank you for reading this. I know it was a long post. P.S. I still get mail for Grace. Number 5. I have been seeing a ghost around my house for the past week. He's around 6 foot tall and wears a yellow shirt, red flannel, black jacket, and black pants. His face is devoid of features and has only eyes and a large mouth. His skin is black and opaque. I see him around 5 times a day staring at me with a blank expression. I am scared, and I don't know what to do about it. My method of getting rid of him is just crying until he goes away. My boyfriend cannot see him, and the man disappeared when he walked into him. I notice it's the same colors as shown on the German flag. My boyfriend is German, so maybe that has significance? I would like information on this, please. If you can respond with assistance, that would be nice. I don't believe he is attached to the room. I have seen him outside at a nearby pond. Also, he has walked up to me before. Thank you. I will respond to this one. It sounds like this ghost might be attached to your boyfriend if you only started seeing him after you started living with your boyfriend. Talk to your boyfriend about it and see if he was in any places he could have picked the ghost up from. Has he messed with any Ouija boards or anything like that? Has he ever gone ghost hunting? Just kind of fill it out and talk to him about it. Just tell the ghost that he is not welcome there and that he needs to stop showing you himself because it is not nice and it scares you and he needs to go away. And you need to be firm about it. And if he still doesn't go away, say, I understand that we can live in harmonious together, but you need to stop walking up to me and staring at me like that every day. Just put your foot down. You can cleanse your house with sage. Just look up how to do it online. But you have to have real intentions towards it. You have to believe in it. You have to do it. And I hope that helps. You could also wear some black tourmaline or onyx or, a type of stone. I have them in my rings and my necklaces, and they just ward off evil spirits, and they help protect you a little bit. They help protect your energy. Those are my recommendations, and you can start by trying that. I hope that helps. All right, y'all, that is the end of the stories for today. I love y'all so much. I will see y'all next week. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy, y'all. It's Curious Raven here on this Friday with some scary haunted stories. I hope y'all enjoy. Number 1. I was staying at the Sahara Hotel, 19th floor, in Las Vegas this weekend. The room had 3 large mirrors, 2 facing each other and 1 facing the bed. First night was normal. Nothing paranormal happened, and we slept fine. But on the second night, my friend and I were separately woken up by strange sounds and feelings of being touched or moved. The next morning we talked, and it turns out we were both hearing tapping sounds, knocks, felt our sheets being moved or pulled, and just had an overwhelming sense of dread the entire night. Final night was the same. Taps coming from the windows or what sounded like the counters, knocks on the ceiling, shadows in the corners of the room, etc. A while into this sleepless night, I woke up randomly and watched my blanket being lifted off my chest as if someone was pinching the blanket into a tent shape. I stared at it rise for about 4 seconds, and then it fell as if whatever was lifting it noticed I was watching. I was tempted to wake up my friend, but didn't, and instead grabbed my blanket tight and tried to fall back asleep, hoping the night would end and we could get the hell out of there. Number 2, I was at a cemetery visiting family who had passed. I decided to wander off and visit some other graves, when suddenly I stop at this grave of a girl who passed when she was my age. My sibling comes along, and we are speaking in front of the girl's grave of how pretty she is, etc., because she had a picture of herself on her grave. Suddenly we began to smell the strong scent of roses in front of her grave, when there was no roses or other flowers nearby. The weather that day was also really humid, and there was no wind. I took 2 steps back, and the smell completely vanished. Then I took 2 steps forward to her grave and began to smell the strong flower smell again. Was this the girl's spirit trying to communicate, or was it purely coincidental? Number 3. Okay, so yesterday evening, I went to go to bed with my boyfriend, and his daughter's ring light turned itself on in her bedroom by itself. I see the light on, and she's not home, so I tell him to check it out. When he opens the door, the ring light is on with obviously no one in there. We look at each other, both confused, and when we look back, it shuts itself off. I was in the kitchen just watching the light linger out the doorway until it shut off. He said, "Nope," and shut the door. Flash forward, maybe an hour, and we were laying in our bed when out of nowhere our Alexa device beeps like the volume had been adjusted. We paid no mind and went to bed. This evening, things got, well, spooky to say the least. Started with the loud bang from our living room, with me in my bedroom and my boyfriend and his daughter in her room. He texted me simultaneously to ask if it was me, as I was texting him the same. Shortly after, I'm on the phone with a good friend, and my Alexa again 3 times changed its own volume. I unplug Alexa, and the one in my boyfriend's daughter room turns itself to max volume. I hear him fighting with it to turn down, and continues to do this with him until he unplugs it. I open our bedroom to find my light in the living room on. It was off, and I had turned it off. I go to walk away, and it turns back on. So I turn it off again. This happened 3 times before I manually switched it completely off. I get to my bedroom, and the ring light in his daughter's room turns on and off 3 times on its own. He unplugs it. Shortly after, Alexa in the living room starts to play music, so I go out and unplug that. I walk to my bedroom, and the Alexa in my bathroom is now on, just full blast playing music, so I'll unplug it. When I get out of the bathroom, the entertainment center lights are on, so I have to unplug that. As I go to walk out, the TV turns on. I turn it off. I go to walk out, and the PS5 now turns on. I walked away because I was just done. About 10 minutes later, I go to turn off the PS5, and my TV turns back on. This TV is very old. I don't even have the remote. I turn all of it all off, and I get mad and kind of yell out that I'm done and it's enough, and I shit you not, I go to walk out of the living room, and the kitchen sink turns on. I am talking about full blast on. I stop dead in my tracks and start to panic. My boyfriend comes out, sees the water running, and me, and is just confused and concerned. I ended up pacing for about 20 minutes, panicking, when my boyfriend stops me, and suddenly I feel 2 hands around my throat. It feels like the air in my lungs have been sucked out. There is a fear in my bones I've literally never felt before, and I can't breathe. Couldn't even gasp for air. I dropped to the floor, and my boyfriend ran to get me water, thinking I was just having a panic attack or something. By the time he got back in front of me, he released me, and it felt as though someone took a burning pan to my throat. Tingling from the feeling is still there. What the actually fuck do I do here? Number 4. Back in 2007, my wife and our 2 young children moved into our first house we rented. It had sat empty for about 5 or so years and was built in 1902. It's so old that the main beam in the Michigan basement was a huge tree log where the builder carved into it and put in cross beams. I went over one day to open it up and do a deep clean before moving in. Our landlord said he would be dropping by to drop off our rental agreement we signed. I was on the main floor when I heard footsteps coming from upstairs. I called out his name but got no response. The footsteps stopped. I went upstairs and heard and felt the closet door shut in our soon-to-be daughter's room. I opened the door, but there was no one. I went back down and explained that we were a young family and that we mean no harm. I gave a cautious warning that if it were here to hurt my family, I would do everything possible to remove whatever was here. Big mistake. About 3 months into living there, we went away for the weekend. Upon coming home, I was carrying our daughter upstairs with my wife, bringing up our infant son. I opened her bedroom door and a black cat was sitting on her bed. It ran past us, scaring my wife. I was able to chase it to the patio where my wife shut the door behind us. It ran behind our stroller, so I opened the outside door and she moved the stroller. No cat. We searched our house for over 2 hours after that, and still no cat. About 2 months after that, I was in our dining room on the computer when I felt a cold chill. Suddenly, my wife let out a scream and the door to the basement slammed shut. I immediately ran to see her. When I entered the room, she was so pissed at me, asking, "How and why did you do that?" I asked, "What's wrong?" My wife replied, "You opened the basement door, peeked your head out at me, and gave me an evil smile." We both sat in silence, realizing the only entrance to the basement was right in front of us. We moved out a month later. Number 5. I was always skeptical that ghosts could exist, but after experiencing this firsthand, I am now and always will be a believer that there is more to our existence than we see. It all started one night my girlfriend and I were getting ready for bed. My girlfriend at the time lived in a really nice apartment by herself, so I would stay with her every few nights. As I was getting ready for bed and washing my face in the upstairs bathroom, I felt like she was standing next to me. I couldn't see with my face covered with soap and water, but I started talking to her. To my shock, when I dried my face and opened my eyes, no one was there. It sent chills down my back and left me with an eerie feeling. I told my girlfriend about it, and she said she felt something similar that evening. Regardless, we both went to sleep and didn't think anything else of it. This is when it gets weird. So the next day, we both get to her place at the same time. When she opens the garage, it's a double-car garage, so I parked on the right and her on the left. One of her winter car tires was moved to the very center of the garage, so neither of us could park. I thought she was playing a joke on me after the night before, but I could tell she was genuinely upset and freaking out. Neither of us had an explanation for it, so we did the common sense thing, and we were sleeping at my apartment that night. My girlfriend was from out of town. She didn't have anyone else that had access to the apartment, so we both became worried that someone had broken in, even though nothing was stolen. The next day, we decided to put security alarms on all the doors. They were the type that had one glued to the door and one on the frame, so if that door is open, the alarm would go off. We put one on every single door, and it felt somewhat secure. But right as we were about to go to bed and turn the alarms on, we heard a swoosh sound and in the hall of the front door. Somehow the alarm was removed from the door and slid across the entire floor. We tried reenacting that sound. It would be like if it fell but it was totally different. Something took it off the door and slid it across the floor without it making a crashing falling sound. We slept at my apartment again that night. We ended up returning the next day and just put crosses all over the house, and we never had another issue. Where she lived, it was more so for older people due to high cost. We would see ambulance there all the time, so my guess it was a previous owner that maybe died and didn't want us still there. I don't know. All I do know is that ghosts, maybe demons, are real, and I will forever believe that. What do you guys make of my experience? Number 6. The property had a history of fires and rebuilding. It was small, but was eventually expanded during one of the rebuilds. It had burnt down and been rebuilt about 15 years before we moved in. Supposedly, the parts that were mostly affected by the fires were the newer parts. There were also rumors of one of the previous owners dying in the house in the surrounding area and nearby Royal Air Force Base being haunted. Most can be explained away. All our coffee cups crashing to the ground, noises coming from the attic, the unexplainable stench of lavender and stale cigarette smoke in the middle of the night, dogs barking at nothing, a water pipe randomly disconnecting in a closet in a bathroom and releasing a torrent of water that caused a lot of damage in the rebuilt area, footsteps up and down the stairs at night, but 2 instances I still cannot explain. My partner and I were sitting on the daybed. There was a large entertainment center on the other side of the room. There's an alcove on the center that I always put my hair tie. We sat parallel to the entertainment center, facing each other. Then my hair tie shoots across the room from the alcove and hits the wall between us. I was about to go out for the night, and I was speaking to my mom in the hallway. My mom was talking to me, but her gaze shifted behind me, and she told me to hold on and greeted someone in the kitchen. I thought someone was peeking through the kitchen window, but she described seeing an old woman with white hair standing in the kitchen behind me. I heard someone whisper, "Hi," behind me. I just shut the kitchen door and left. We started greeting Mary anytime something weird happened or the lavender smell came back. I kinda miss her. Alright, y'all, I hope you liked that small collection of stories. I will see y'all this Saturday for Creepypasta Saturday. I love y'all so much. I'll see y'all soon. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven on this Friday morning. I hope everyone had a great week. We are going to read a collection of haunted house stories today. I hope you enjoy. Number 1. I've always been into the supernatural, ever since I was a child. Needless to say, after a while, this idea no longer scares me, as it did before. For the past 10-ish days, I've been staying in a different house while on vacation with my family. It's small and old, with a significant history. The house is located in a small town, known for its fishing and hunting, beautiful views. I've been here many times, and the town has never felt eerie to me, which is how many describe it because of the old buildings and the lack of people. A few days into my stay, the person we were with told us a story. How basically, if you look for a specific angle in the yard, you can see a stump, shaped as a woman holding an infant. He goes on to say that a single family lived here, man, woman, and infant. The husband killed himself in his bedroom soon after. The wife was very upset and also decided to kill herself and the infant, manifesting into that stump. I always fall asleep with a video or music on, very quietly. Last night, once the video shut off, I awoke, which rarely happens. I look around my room, and I see a couple standing in front of the window staring at the door. The man was resting his arm around his wife, who was standing on his left. They looked calm, and the husband was glancing down at his feet. She was looking forward. I was startled and shouted, "Yes?" I blinked, and they disappeared. I'm not sure who this was. or if I was just half awake, but either way, it was pretty interesting. Number 2. So, I don't know if I'm tripping out for no reason or if I'm really hearing things. This is the first time I've heard something like this. So basically, I got home yesterday and hung out in our room until she finally went to bed. I decided that I was going to play some Call of Duty before I had to go to sleep. Once I was tired, I then had to use the bathroom, and no sooner than I was done, it sounded like my front door opened. I live in a small 2-bedroom trailer, mind you, and my bathroom is essentially right next to the front door. I have a dog. She stays on the porch, and she knows she isn't allowed in the house. But it sounded like she was in the hallway. I thought someone had come in on us, whether it be her dad or if my dog knocked the door open. I opened the bathroom door after about a minute of me trying to see if I could hear footsteps, and nothing. Door was never opened apparently. My girlfriend baby mama is schizophrenic, so she didn't think of telling me she hears this all the time because she thinks she makes it up. I told her what happened, and then I learned she has heard it multiple times. What do you all think could be going on? Is my door broken? Is my home haunted? If you feel like I've left anything out or want me to elaborate on anything so you can understand it better, please comment and I'll give you more information. Number 3. What does it mean when a spirit ghost starts mocking someone? My boyfriend and I just moved into a new place late April, and for the last 2 days we have been experiencing a mocking of his voice. I guess it's just me, because he hasn't heard it yet, but he believes me and we're both very freaked out. The day it happened, when he wasn't awake, and just 15 minutes ago, when he asked me if I want anything to drink. We will say something, and even though I hear it, I respond with a what? And he never actually said anything. So far, it's only been questions the ghost or spirit has said. The people who lived there before us were abusers of intoxications, and it was a very violent household. We've heard a window open since living here, which resulted in the landlord getting cameras around the home in case it was the last people trying to get in. But now I'm thinking it wasn't them. Obviously, that's not for sure, but we're just really freaked out. If anyone has any info, it would be greatly appreciated. Number 4. It's been about 3 years that I've had him. I usually always like getting something to eat late, so today while I was making myself something, told my dog to come since I like sharing some with him. Instead, he started growling and barking into the empty space behind me. My dog is really quiet and barely barks at all, so it's really out of character for him. This, of course, creeped me out, but I tried thinking logically. We do have mice in the house, so I assume maybe he saw one of those, but I could not find any at all. And then I thought maybe it's the window and he's seeing his reflection. So I closed it with the empty space behind me, and this creeped me out even more, and I got out of my kitchen and went to the living room, and I called him. But he didn't budge. He stayed there growling at God knows what. I've always believed in ghosts, but I don't know. Maybe there's an explanation for this? As I'm writing this in my room, my dog went back to the kitchen. My room is close to the kitchen, and I can hear him still growling and puffing his nose. This happened around 3 years ago as well, and he was maybe around 1. It was the same spot, and he did the same thing, refused to leave the place. And then the next day, when me and my mom were watching TV with the dog, we heard a loud bang. When we went into the kitchen, some of our cups had been taken and thrown, with the refrigerator door opened wide. We store them there because they're the ice-cold cups that you put in the refrigerator. They were smashed and everything. I don't know if there could be a logical reason, or maybe a ghost, but I've never really had any problems here in the house aside from maybe some doors opening on their own occasionally, and my family is very spiritual and believes in that type of stuff. Number 5, we move a year or so, and just recently, about a month, I keep seeing what I think is a spirit. It comes and goes mainly when I lay down with my youngest for hood nap time. What I see are small, almost sparkly comets moving around, but this morning they merged as I reached my hand out towards them. They reached to me. My mother-in-law that I have never met, as she had passed before I met my husband, but we have a teddy bear made from one of her coats. The sparkling always tends to come and go through the bear. At first I thought it was just light reflection or seeing issues, but when I look around, it's as if they are only in one spot of the room. We also recently rearranged the entire room and still they originate and leave the light the bear in the corner. Any insight would be appreciated, as I am 31 and never experienced this before. I don't really look for paranormal things or into type of this stuff, but I do really enjoy reading people's auras, so I do have a lot of practice in seeing things others sometimes do not. Number 6. Since being at the land my childhood trailer had been moved to, I had a lot of experiences. They're normally nothing too aggressive, but there is one that is. I have been on a new property since 2006, and this entity has been here since. Started in what was my parents' room, which is now mine and my wife's. We have kept sage in the closet, periodically changing it out. Recently, I have been having a reoccurring experience while sleeping with this spirit from my childhood, and I didn't think anything of it, but just earlier my wife brought it up, that she saw it. I didn't tell her about it when she moved in 2013 in fear of scaring her. She has seen it before and we talked about it initially. I'm wondering if anyone has any suggestions about this spirit, or we just keep doing the sage process. When we do it, we don't get anything for 2 to 3 years outside of the closet in our room. What do you think? Alright, y'all. That is the end of the video. I hope y'all enjoyed those weird hauntings of trailers, mainly. It was a lot that had to do with trailers and stuff. But I hope y'all have a great Friday. I will see you tomorrow for Creepy Pasta Saturday. I love y'all so much. I will see you in the next one. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven here on Saturday with another creepy pasta. This one is by Reflection. It is called I Should Have Just Gone to Walmart. Ugh, Emma, can you get the trunk for me? The dim winter sun was setting over the parking lot, nearly devoid of shoppers at this late hour, aside from a van in one distant corner that had just started backing out of its spot. I set my bag down in the passenger seat and rounded the side of my mom's green Camry, met with her impatient and lightly sweating face. I popped the trunk, allowing her to practically collapse into it with the weight of the groceries. Something burst in one of the bags, prompting her to curse under her breath. I just don't get why you won't stick a quarter in those trolleys over there. You get it back afterwards. Mom, still arranging the bags into a position that would stop them toppling over, on the drive home, looked at me scornfully. The Walmart downtown doesn't make you pay. None of the stores around here do, so why should I? You know, we only come here to Aldi. It's cheaper. I just said you get the quarter back afterwards. It's to make sure people put the trolleys back. I sighed, knowing there was no swaying her. Instead of shooting back with some flimsy reasoning, Mom patted her pockets and swore, "Oh, for goodness sake. I've gone and left my wallet at the till again, haven't I?" Before I could get a word out, she was gone like a rocket, racing against the store closing time. Night's chill descended, raising goose flesh, so I slammed the trunk and hopped back into the passenger seat out of the cold. I sat there praying my mom had the haste to get back soon with the keys and start up the heating. There was something else, though. My heart made itself known with a rising, insistent pulse. Was something wrong? Not this again, I groaned, shutting my eyes and following a basic breathing routine to calm my nerves. The anxiety was bad enough, but the anger I felt at the nonsense panic had always been worse for me. Just stop it. Lasagna's waiting for us at home. It's gonna be so good. I opened my eyes. Had I heard something? No, not heard. Felt. I leaned forward to scan the parking lot. Nothing. Then I jumped back in my seat. There it was again. It was small. So much so I was surprised I'd even noticed it. A light but bone-deep vibration was emanating from somewhere. Almost like someone nearby was trying to pull down on a gigantic zipper, one tooth at a time. The comparison should have sounded silly, but my heart continued to pound faster and faster until I was sure beyond a doubt that something bad would happen. Something was wrong. It took me longer than I'd have liked to get out, with the seatbelt clamping as I struggled to unbuckle it. There was no smell in the air. Did it smell before? I couldn't remember. No more cars in the lot, only the Camry. No more noise. Again, the slight vibration in the air. Too low a frequency to determine its source. Enough to sense it was there. I tilted my head, staring up at lumpy clouds that cast shadows on each other. Ah, those clouds. I've always loved how they look until one of the shadows moved. I'm not stupid. Thought it was just a cloud's shadow matching its slow drift across the sky. I squinted. The shadow wasn't being cast on a cloud. It was above, or above them, which made me realize whatever I was seeing, it wasn't a shadow. What happened next is too hard to articulate. I've never seen anything else like it, before or since. The dark mass above the clouds began to sort of extend, beaming down at an angle, like sun rays, but moving at a steady pace, or how water or ink moves up paper by way of capillary action. A black beam. But it was more than that. I was so absorbed in the spectacle it had fully drawn on me that this thing was getting closer. Closer to me. And as it closed in, there was no mistaking it. While it continued to stretch all the way back above the clouds, the outline of it, the cross-section, was almost human-shaped. Arms, head, body, and legs, but the limbs and dunted nubs like a stick figure. By the time it stopped, a good 3-4 stories above, I still hadn't moved. I couldn't. I could do nothing but watch in disbelief as lights and layers of color began to flash inside the humanish figure, seeming to have parallax as if whatever lay beyond was a space of its own. Amazingly, something managed to distract me for a moment. A flash of light in my peripheral. A phone torch. Emma? Emma? Are you having a stroke or something? I blinked. What? No, I mean, Mom was back, apparently still without her wallet, now scanning the asphalt for any sign of it. Why didn't I hear her coming back? She clicked her tongue, then stopped standing there like an idiot and help me find it. Come on, it's getting late. I did, in fact, keep standing there, glancing between her and the flashing shadow prism above us. I did a double take. Those glary bright, almost offensively colorful layers were speeding up towards the end of the beam, towards me, piling up on themselves to assemble a figure stepping soundlessly out into thin air. Mom kept calling me. I heard her. Couldn't process her words. Everything else was secondary to the figure above us. It has fully formed, cloaked in a coarse-looking gown, with skin so pale and shadeless. It was as if it radiated a faint glow. The sound of rapid footsteps brought me back to myself. I looked down just in time to see my mom's face painted in a teetering mixture of worry and annoyance. She went to speak, but I held up a hand and pointed to the figure. Squinting at me, she looked to where I was pointing and froze. The whole time, I'd secretly been hoping I was hallucinating. She saw it too. She saw something at least, and that was enough to confirm what I've been dreading. "Who is that?" she asked. Her voice sounded so small and dry. If I could have spoken, I'd have asked, "What is that?" instead. I watched on in terror as the figure began to slow descent straight down. The closer it drew, the more of it I could make out. There were these iridescent lines floating across the surface of its skin, moving like sun patterns to the bottom of a swimming pool, like the silhouette it had emerged from. It had no hands or feet, just round nubs, although those on its arms had the same light depression on the center. "Car! The car!" "Mom, the car. Get in the car now," I whispered. No response. I reached out, grabbing her by the arm and shaking her. She was absolutely rigid. One of us had to move. I imagined we were both hoping the other would do so. A second figure emerged from the prism, identical to the first, except it was wearing a plain t-shirt and shorts. At the same time, the first one finally touched down to the asphalt and stood, tilting its head up, apparently waiting for the other to arrive. If I had any lingering doubt that these weren't human, it was squashed when I saw their faces, or lack of thereof. I couldn't see any ears, and where a face should have been was only a circular metal grate, maybe gold or brass. The four of us stood there, still and silent. They stared at us, and we stared right back, completely lost in the foreign sight of the beings. A breath. Then they turned to each other. I don't know if I expected them to talk, but they didn't. Not in any language I know. Faint at first, getting brighter with every pulse. Constellations began to flash behind the metal face grates of each of them. I heard nothing aside from a few damp vibrations, yet somehow I knew there was a conversation going on. Very slowly, I took a step back and reached an arm behind me to feel for the car. All the while my eyes stayed locked on the beings. I kept reaching further and further. My fingers brushed nothing but air. One of them abruptly turned and looked at me or at my mom. I couldn't tell. My chest tightened. This wasn't happening. It raised one stunted arm to point at my mom, releasing another cascade of flashing lights behind its girl face. The other crossed its arms and looked over too, like it was waiting for something. I had to risk it. I pivoted, throwing a glance over my shoulder. The car was 20, maybe 25 feet away. I didn't remember wandering that far from it. I noticed something else then. The trees, the grass, and all the greenery surrounding the parking lot was gone. It gave me the impression of a plant that had never evolved life, or where all life was extinct. There was only bare, dark soil enclosing the lot. Seconds before I went for the car, Mom let out a scream, one that I still hear from time to time in my dreams and background noise. I spun around to see the first being, the one wearing a gown, gliding across the ground with an arm outstretched. Mom didn't have the time to move. It came to a dead stop before her, arm still raised, and I saw something emerging from the small depression at the end of its stump. What I now understood was a hole. Whatever came out was darker than the night sky, and I couldn't place its shape, but it looked like it was made out of a mass of ever-shifting black crystals. Mom screamed again. It was more of a gasp, actually. A gasp that lasted barely a second before a bubble broke free of a shifting appendage and fixed itself over her mouth, silencing her. Another four floated down to her wrist and ankles, binding her in place and stopping her from moving as one broke off from the being. It looked like an arrowhead or some other sharp triangular tool, a razor edge cutting through the air and hovering just over her stomach. I understood the danger then, not for me but her. Abandoning caution, I leapt forward yelling, "Get away from her!" But I rolled my ankle and went crashing down onto the cold, hard asphalt. Dazed, I tried to lift myself. I managed to look up at the beings with blood pouring from my nose and cut on my cheek. The one in front of my mom barely seemed to notice me. Give me a quick look, then getting back to the matter at hand, whatever that was. Mom squirmed against her restraints, issuing muffled groans through her nose. I forced my limbs to work, but I was held fast. Mounds of that shifting black crystal had smothered my hands, binding them to the ground. I looked at my mom helpless, terrified. She met my eyes, blinked away a tear, and squeezed her eyelids shut. At the back, the being wearing a t-shirt made some kind of gesture, like it was impatient, and the robe being nodded. Turning back to my mom and directing the arrow-shaped object. At the same time, her blouse began to lift up and off of her, pulled by an invisible force exposing her belly. The being hesitated for a second, and I felt a spark of hope that it might show mercy. But of course it didn't. The dark arrowhead passed into her skin, slicing through layers like butter and dragging a line downwards, leaving a clean incision. Wasting no time, the being reached inside, fiddled around for a moment, then pulled out the severed end of my mom's intestine. Blood and shit splattered the ground, trailing away from her as the being floated backwards, keeping hold of her organ until it was stretched to its full length. I tasted vile. Stop, you fucks, you fucking... A gush of vomit interrupted me, flooding out onto the ground, mixing in the intestinal fluids to create a disgusting speckled pattern, which prompted another wave of vomit from me and tears to cloud my vision. Oh, please! I wiped my sleeve over my eyes so I could see the being in the t-shirt had a long pole-shaped protrusion stretching out from the end of its arm, extending to match the length of my mom's intestines. It studied something for a second, before shrugging and nodding at the rogue being. In the blink of an eye, the intestines retracted back like a frightened snake and piled back inside my mom's body. I just stared, not able to understand. The sides of the incision pulled into each other and appeared to heal completely in a matter of seconds. As soon as I processed this, I felt my restraint slacken, then disappear entirely. I shot to my feet, nearly tripping over again, and grasped onto my mom's arm. I pulled under the assumption that she had been released. She wasn't. Why weren't they letting her go? Freezing up, I cranked my head to look at the beings. More flashing lights. The one in a t-shirt was handing something over to the other, but I couldn't see anything passing between them. Maybe it was something invisible, or something my mind just wasn't built to perceive. I continued to tug mechanically, trying to free her. Her skin was cold and slick, and she was shivering. It did no good. The black crystal held fast, but nearly collapsed in relief and shock when the robed figure began to ascend back up to the prism it had come from. The other grabbed onto its gown, communicating something. The robe being dropped back down, but threw its arms out to what I guessed was frustration. T-shirt gestured towards us again, still conversing with the other, waving its arms around. Still, the robed figure seemed to come and slide across the ground towards us again. Lights continued to flash behind its girl face, all varying shades of orange and red, like it was angry. I couldn't let it happen again, and lunged at it, planning to do, I don't really know. I just wanted to protect my mom. Right as I made contact with the being, I felt a shift in the air. A fluid in my eyes swirled, it made me dizzy. When my eyes stopped rolling to the side, I realized I was being held still by two pale, stunted arms with odd patches of hot and cold traveling around on its skin. Somehow I wound up in the arms of the being wearing a t-shirt, and those arms held me tighter and tighter than any living thing should be able to. "Get the fuck off of me," I screamed, flailing and lashing out in a desperate bet to escape. I tried to bite down on one of its arms. It felt like I'd been curb stomped, like I'd bitten down full force on granite. I kinda gave up after that. It just hurt too much to think. Instead, I took my surroundings where I was again. Mom! Mom! The robed being was standing in the way of her, but it was doing something. I couldn't see what. By the way, my mom was squealing behind her gag. It made the first procedure sound like a pillow fight. I just cried. There was no avenue for relief except the tears. Then everything went quiet. Mom trailed off into a whine, and then nothing. No wind, no trees, or leaves rustling. Behind they'd all vanished. Just me, my mom, and these things. The one holding me loosened its grip, and I gasped, gulping down stagnant air, floated over to where Mom was, and robed beings stepped aside, finally letting me see what was happening. I didn't really want to know. I really, really didn't. My muscles was locked into place. In one hand, the robe being held one end of the artery it had pulled out of my mom's chest. Without warning, the two entities shot up into the air, coming to halt somewhere above. As they moved, more blood vessels phased through the skin of my mom's body, contorting and straightening to fuse at their ends, forming an unholy, pulsely rope. With speed faster than I could process, the beings flew away, vanishing into the night while clutching the single fused vessel of veins, arteries, and capillaries. There was blood, yes, but only a little. It all seemed to be contained in that one tube they continued to pull along through the atmosphere. From the opposite direction they passed once. I saw them pass over one more time and disappear into the distance before the meaty vessel pulled taut. At the time, I hadn't really pieced it together. I think they'd looped around the entire planet. Not once, but twice, and then some. In what couldn't have been more than 10 seconds. I blinked, and they were back, standing in the parking lot and flashing their lights at each other. I didn't have the energy to whisper and protest. T-shirt looked reluctant in some way and handed over more of something I couldn't see to the robed entity. As they did this, the red stream they'd made from my mom's blood vessels pulled back by itself at impossible speed, retracting out over 2 loops of planet Earth and back into my mom's, breaking apart, phasing back inside, and resembling into their proper structure. That's what I'd guessed anyways. Glassy-eyed and so pale, the crystalline restraints dissolved and my mom slumped limp to the ground. I stood motionless for a second before realizing my own restraints were gone as well, and bolted over to her. I was whispering something. Assurances, maybe apologies, I can't remember. The two beings watched us. Then they ascended back up to the dark prism and out of sight. It began to pull back up into the sky, and when I blinked, all the trees and the grass were back. It all felt normal, almost normal. The only change was that the sky was a little darker, and my mom felt a little colder. Then a lot colder. I placed 2 fingers on her neck. There was no pulse. When the paramedics arrived, they rushed over to us. Their movements were frantic but controlled. Just 30 seconds later, the urgent energy was gone, replaced by a dull rhythm that told me all I needed to know. She was pronounced dead on scene. The coroner later concluded that my mom had simply died. No cause could be found, but brain damage signified a level of hypoxia. I guess that's what happens when your blood is outside of you, even if it's just for a minute. Strangely, I found my anxiety to diminish after that night. It still flares up now and then, but most of the time, there's just this hollow feeling in its place. I don't go to Aldi anymore. Seems silly to mull over something like that, but I can't even be near those big parking lots now. Get my groceries delivered. Maybe it sounds like I'm managing. I am. Inside, though, there's a crack that can't be fixed. Can't be filled. It's worn down over time, gotten less jagged and easier to deal with. Things don't really shock me anymore, or at least the shock is dulled. There will be no justice for her, even if I sought it. I doubt we could ever even access whatever plane those beings hail from. Whatever power we think we have, all those things see when they look at us is a world of monkeys, banging stones together, I'm sure of it. In fact, I'm willing to bet on it, as much as they bet on my mom. Wow, that was a interesting story. It was kind of like, all those stories about when people get abducted and then they come back with scars and stuff that they don't know where they came from. It was like that, but we knew what they did. And I really liked it. But it really does suck that her mom died. I don't know, it was weird. But great story. I enjoyed reading it. All right, y'all. I hope y'all have a good weekend. Love y'all so much. I'll see y'all next week. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Hey y'all, it's Curious Raven. I have one story for y'all today. It's a little bit longer. Let's get into it. It is by Carweed Ghost, and it's called My Experiences. Didn't realize they were ghosts till I lost 90% of my vision. When I was 4 or 5, traveling across the country, I saw a beautiful long blonde hair woman in a long sleeve dress with tiny flowers printed standing in the middle of a flat golden plain with the wind blowing her hair and dress, and I knew she had died by a wildfire soon after. I still remember the image and thought later maybe reincarnation memory. 9 years old, Air Force brat, we visited Turkey. There was a tunnel leading up to the Colosseum grounds from the cages and prison cells below, and I saw a woman in a traditional biblical garb with a blue shawl over her hair, bent over with her hands on the wall for support, blinking up into the sunlight. I had the overwhelming urge to touch the wall where her hand had been. Just my imagination? Years go by and I am diagnosed with an incurable eye disease. My sister and I go on a road trip for historical sites while I still can. And then I knew this was a ghost energy. Shiloh National Cemetery Park, walking around, I saw a copse of trees with one Confederate marker among Union markers, and I wondered how he got there. Suddenly in my mind's eye, I saw a very young slim man with a dark hair stumble out of the dense brush and be confronted by the sight of Union men sitting around a fire. Imagination again? Later, my sister and I were standing at the dedication plaque podium, and my sister said how sad this place made her feel. Suddenly, I felt a sense of pride and said how proud that their sacrifice was being honored. Then felt joy and laughed and tried to shoulder bump the Confederate ghost I knew, could not see, standing beside me. Sight deteriorated fast, facial recognition gone. It's a blurry world. By the way, I can only type on my phone close to my face. Black screen, white lettering. Allen, Texas, standing outside grocery store, waiting on my ride. I look up, but not 2 feet from me is an older gentleman with full head of gray hair and bushy mustache, smiling and staring at me, not saying a word. At the time, I didn't wonder how I could see him so clearly. Minutes go by, silence. I'm wondering if he is just standing there judging me, my attire, etc. I turn my back on him and ignore him. Thought no more about it until 2 years later, living in Texas. Again, outside waiting for my ride. He's there, 2 feet from me, silent and smiling at me. 75-mile distance from the last time I saw him. That's when I realized I can see him as I did in Allen because I recognized him from Allen. Remember, facial recognition is gone. I can't even see myself in the mirror. That shocked me. I don't know him. I walked away. Now you're going to say I'm crazy or hallucinating. 4 years later, I'm living in Kentucky, and I visit an Amish store as I am waiting in line at the cashier. And I see an Amish couple in traditional garb standing perfectly still staring at me. I see her clearly with her bonnet and long dark green dress, slim, with hard lines on her face, wrinkles. She barely comes to her husband's shoulders. I look at the line, I look at him, and see his white shirt and red suspenders. But there is a black blob that covers his face and part of his shoulder. Okay, I think. Blind spot from my eyesight, not wondering why I can see her so clearly. turn to look at the cashier, and I can see her plump, blonde, middle-aged with glasses smiling at me, and suddenly think she is connected to the couple. Then memory lapse until I found myself with a receipt in my hand saying it will be okay, it will be okay, to a crying cashier who won't look up at me. Last experience was December 5th, 2023, a weekend getaway with my sister and her daughter-in-law. Nashville, Tennessee, Broadway Street bar hopping. I had slowed down drinking and had switched to water as we walked into Blake's place. Daughter-in-law was very drunk and got nose to nose with the bouncer. Suddenly, I felt such pride for the bouncer and could see him and daughter-in-law clearly. He stood there stoic and unresponsive to daughter-in-law, barrage of drunk BS till she gave up and moved on. He had a black stocking cap and a heavy coat and gloves on. Roundish face, but not fat, small nose and thin lips. I went to the back of the dance floor and planted myself there so my sister would know where I was and listened and enjoyed the band with my water. To the right of me I saw, as if in a spotlight, a tall blonde man in a red, short-sleeved t-shirt and huge biceps standing there just staring at me, not drinking or moving to the music as the blurry guys behind him were. Song after song, he just stood there watching me. I felt a little self-conscious. I am now 60, so what the hell? Eventually my sister came to tell me it was time to leave to get daughter-in-law to hotel. Memory lapse, not drunk, had been on water. Don't remember anything until we were outside on the sidewalk when the bouncer came running out to me, grabbed my arm with a shocked expression on his face and demanded, "What did you just say to me? What did you just say to me?" "I don't know," I cheaply said. "Best band?" And he stood back and watched us as we moved on down the road. I believe the red shirt with a ghost connected to him and said something to him through me. Unlike Shiloh, like Amish store, I don't know what the message was. If I hadn't affected these two people the way I had, I would think I had hallucinations or a very vivid imagination. But seeing the stoic bouncer so shook up convinced me, and I am trying to find explanation validation, that I am not crazy. That I do not think you are. I see ghosts. I don't see them all the time, just sometimes. It's like maybe once to twice a year, I'll see them really in detail. And then sometimes they'll talk to me through my mind. I can hear them and we talk to each other. But it only happens for like a couple of seconds. It's not like I'm just chilling and sitting and talking with a ghost, but all the other days I'll see the black little shadows, go around the corners and out the corner of my eye and all of that. So I know they're around me. It's just, I don't know why I only see some of them. But I believe you. Most definitely you have a gift. A gift. And I think these ghosts are speaking through you. That's amazing. It almost makes me think of like a shaman. So maybe you should kind of check that out. I usually wasn't going to say what I thought, but I just had to chime in because this is amazing. And don't let your gifts go to waste. Alright, everyone, that is it. That's the end of the story. I will see y'all again this coming week. I love y'all so much. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe.
Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross